an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Broadchurch, Season 1, Episode 1. In this episode, a little boy turns up dead on a beach, having been apparently strangled by a fully grown man. Meanwhile, his best friend erases a bunch of text history. What's up with that, kid? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Paul for commissioning this episode. What's up, Paul? I am really not sure what to expect with this series. I have heard that it's a little bit devastating, but very good. Like, I have not heard anybody say that they did not like it. And I have to say, this first episode was one of those that had me like just thinking about it after I saw it. I watched it fairly early this morning at like 9 o'clock. I sort of like woke up and I was like, you know what? I'm feeling kind of out of it in a way that I don't want to like, I don't feel like I can like make myself do something. So I'm going to let myself sort of zone out and get into this first episode and let's just like let it happen, man. And I was so engaged in it from beginning to end. It was just compelling to watch. And wow, if this isn't a fucking who's who of British actors, we have just got one person after another turning up that I recognize. And it was just like, you know, it's happened so often that you would think that you would get used to it, but you just sort of forget that these people are in other stuff, that the huge series is that you know them from. And I cannot tell you guys how this is something that I've talked about actually on other shows as well, that I know when somebody has managed to do it, but I don't understand why it works and why when it doesn't work, what the problem was there. But this is a show that I feel like I cared about people right away. And I understood like the dynamic in the town right away. And it's certainly the one of the opening scenes of the husband, and y'all are going to have to help me with names. I do not want to look anything up at all because it's a mystery. It's not even like a regular TV show where it's just like, well, I don't want to spoil the plot. This is a mystery. I don't want to know anything. But if y'all want to help me with, you know, mom and dad's names, the David Tennant's character, and what is Olivia? Is that her name? But she goes by Ellie, is what she prefers. I remember Ellie just because she made such a point of wanting to be called Ellie. But yeah, if y'all want to feed me those. The husband goes through town in the morning, and it's just this like slow walkthrough that lets you know how much everyone knows each other. The town is incredibly small, but it's big enough that it takes some time for word to travel of things. It's not like the kind of thing where, you know, in an hour, everybody has heard about it. It's just like, because you get the impression, as much as it is a small town, it doesn't really feel so far like we have the typical small town stereotype characters where there are people who are just up in everybody's fucking business. Now that might be because we haven't met them yet. You know, that might be the journalist. But as of right now, that tends to be a thing, is the small town thing is just people like always gossiping really badly. And it's often at the forefront of what you see when you're introduced to towns like that in media. And these people just feel like regular people trying to live their lives and do their best. And I just really like, I have no idea what the hell is going on with this new DI that has shown up here. But he seems haunted, feels like a generous word. This is a man who everybody is talking about how he nearly lost his job, when I think the Daily Mail journalist, the woman that gets, comes in from London, I think, finds out that he's going to be the lead on this investigation, she's shocked to find out that he even was given a new job. Like that, she thought whatever happened to him would have been a career-ruining scenario. I would say scandal sounds like the word people would use. And what it seems like, and this is just my theory here, it seems like this dude was suspected in something similar, of perhaps the murder of a child, because of the way he reacts when he sees the body on the beach and very specifically says, "Oh my God, don't do this to me." That doesn't feel like I don't want to deal with a murder. That doesn't feel like oh, this poor kid, I don't want to see this body or anything like that. Felt very personal and very this exact circumstance can't really fucking be happening right now. There was just something about it that was almost, are you fucking kidding me? To his tone, but sad. Not oh, really? Just that sort of, that thing that happens to you when something truly awful follows upon something else truly awful that you thought you'd left behind. That's what's in his voice. So I am just incredibly excited to find out what that is all about, because it's a matter of time. So far, he has been assigned to this case. Well, I'm saying he's been assigned, and he has, but he is in the position where he is the only option, right? And I find it strange that he is given a position that was promised to Ellie. Ellie is really mad about it. She feels like when she's talking to her boss after she gets given the news that she was that the job was given to somebody else. At first I thought that Ellie had come in to a job that wasn't there for her anymore. It turns out she still has her position, but she had been essentially promised a promotion, and she took a 3-week leave of absence and then came back expecting that after getting there, she would get her promotion. I would like to know, first of all, what that leave of absence was about. Why did she have to do that? That's a long time. And it could be just vacation, but that's not what she says. Leave of absence is a different thing. And I don't know. I want to know about that. And also, this dude, there's a real sense to this town of people hiring people they know. People trusting people they know. And this dude comes in that nobody seems to know who he is. He had an apparently well enough publicized scandal in his past that the chief, is she the chief of police? Is that what her title is? I don't know if there's sheriffs out there or if that's a thing. But she seems to be a little concerned at the fact that he's going to be heading this investigation with his history and what that's going to look like to the press and what he's going to have to deal with. And apparently she's the only one who knows about this. No one else has brought up any of this because they seem to be unaware of who he is. So in that respect, he really feels like an outlier so far. He is the one character that nobody else seems to really know. And when we see where he's staying, he's living at a hotel, basically. Now, it could be that he's waiting to find a place to live, that there's a place that's being prepared for him to live. There is something about the fact that he is still in a hotel at this point, though, that for me feels like he is not really super interested in putting roots down. Or else he would have had that taken care of. He's clearly been at this job for a week now. And staying in a hotel feels right for what we see of him. Because the man's a mess. He's clearly hasn't shaven in days by the time we see him. He has the look of somebody who doesn't sleep. Who probably smokes too much. I don't know if he's a smoker in the show. But I feel like he has to smoke, right? He might smoke, and I saw it and I just forgot that I saw it, but 100%, that is a chain smoking, coffee drinking, barely eats anything kind of guy. And I am so curious what the hell is in his background that has not only the chief of police worried, but this journalist surprised that he was able to get another gig. I say gig, but I think that's fair. So I'm getting so far out here. The very start of the episode is also sort of surprising because it's nighttime when things begin. We see the water, the waves crashing, the downtown area, which is completely empty, all of these storefronts, but there is not a soul on the street. And there is a kid who is standing on the cliffs above this beach. And he is dripping blood from one hand and breathing hard. And he is staring at the cliff in a way that suggests that he is contemplating jumping, or I don't know what. It looks like he is looking down at something. But when the camera swoops over his head, there isn't anything down there. And the kid closes his eyes. And I really thought we were going to see him just jump. And instead, we get the title card and a fade out from that moment. And when we find out what's happened to him the next day, he is in a weird position on the beach that immediately as a viewer, he didn't jump. That couldn't have happened unless he went running off the edge of the cliff and flying through the air. And the way that he was lying did not look like somebody who had fallen. He looked like somebody who had been laid down, which is indeed what we find out. The crime scene investigators and apparently the coroner seem to think the wounds are not consistent with a fall. The trajectory that he would have had to take if he fell wouldn't have landed him there. None of it makes sense. And, but one thing that they do say at the crime scene investigation, which I kind of thought was surprising, is that they don't believe that he was up on the cliffs at all, which, that one was interesting. And I have no idea what it is that they're working with right now in terms of the kind of forensics, because they are a really, really small town. And I don't really know what kind of resources they have. Also, we see the kid deleting the text on his cell phone later, and it's really clear that this is an old-fashioned phone model. Now, it could be because he's really young and his parents gave him the most basic phone that he could get away with. I don't know what year this is set, is what I'm saying. So that also has an effect on things. There are times where forensics, even in a small town, might be more available later on in our timeline because things become more affordable and accessible. But the fact that they can't detect anything that indicates that the kid was up on the edge of the cliff, in my opinion, that has to mean he wasn't killed there, because being strangled and there being an adult, there would be footprints, there would be indications of his feet kicking, probably. I would think there would be something to indicate that people had stood here. That said, we see how busy the beach is later on. And maybe there's enough people walking back and forth on the top of that cliff that it would cover up any footsteps or whatever. The kid does drip blood, and we see that. But that's a very tiny amount of blood. It was like a drop or two. If by the time the camera cuts away, we are to believe the kid walked away. If he kept standing there, I have no idea. And one would think he might have left a dripping trail of blood all the way there. But it's not a dripping trail on a white tile floor. It's a dripping trail on wild grass. It's not even somebody's lawn where it's all cut evenly. This is just going to be really difficult to see if anybody ever sees it. I'm interested in finding out whether or not anybody's going to put that together and discover that, because really the only saving grace that could cause them to find it is somebody deciding to go up there with some luminol or something, find the exact right place to spray it, and there hasn't been any rain. So I expect That's not going to have a factor. I don't think that they're going to find that blood. Also, we see in the beginning of the introduction to David Tennant's character how he got called down for somebody getting a bunch of gas siphoned out of a tractor or like a lawn mower, like a riding mower. So I think it's a tractor though. And I have to think that's related somehow. It's the kind of thing that we're shown that for a reason. And I don't know what that is. There is a very distinct like cut in the wire, what do you call it? Barbed wire, that seems to indicate, oh, that's where they got in. That could be where the kid cut himself. I don't know if that kid would have wire cutters to get through, or if he found an opening and walked through, or if somebody cut and dragged him through. But maybe that's how he injured himself and started bleeding. And that cuts aren't really mentioned when the coroner is like reporting how like cause of death. He just mentions the strangulation and doesn't really talk about the other abrasions and things, because I'm assuming he doesn't really think that they are important as of right now. They don't look like they are related to the cause of death, so it's not on the top of his priority list to talk about. But I think that's going to come up, that they're going to realize that some of the cuts on his hand are consistent with barbed wire. But, you know, again, all theories. This is all just me, like, conjecture. So when I said, like, the beginning was sort of surprising, what I mean by that is I didn't expect that we were going to see this little boy alive. I knew coming into this that Broadchurch was about a child being murdered and their body being found under strange circumstances. And that was pretty much all I knew. And I assumed that the episode was going to begin with us seeing the body, if not just the body being discovered. And there is something about showing us this kid standing there with this blood dripping and this mysterious like stare down the cliffs that really gets you into that sense of dread that can be so effective. That's something that I find myself falling prey to a lot. When writers also can manage to do this, they can sort of like let you know, well, you're aware we're heading in this direction, right? I'm just going to give you a little sneak peek of the thing that's about to happen. And now I'm going to back up. And I'm going to leave you with that little kernel to fucking bother you. But we're going to pull way, way away from that now. And I've always found that to be extremely effective. It's one of those things that I really enjoyed, especially in some of Stephen King's writing. And then he'll like way overdo it. And then I get tired and I'm like, what are you doing? You gotta stop fucking projecting everything, dude. But something like this, they're not giving you any answers. They're just giving you another piece of the puzzle that other people don't even have, but it's not actually a solution to the puzzle. It's not actually really even that helpful. All it is that spot that he's found isn't where he died. Here's where he was standing, and he was already injured, but he didn't seem to be with anybody. He didn't seem to have been like talking to anyone. He's not looking around. He seems to be alone and believe himself to be alone. So what the fuck is he looking at, and who finds him, or who brought him there? And I just really like that as an opening. That really gets you, you know? I have to say that the one guess I will make as to his cause of death, regarding like not actual physical cause, but the reason somebody would kill him, I have to think is this kid like saw or knows something that somebody didn't want him to see or know. But that's all I've got. That's really it. That's also part of why him like looking down at the beach feels significant. Like he just saw something and is really freaked out. But when the camera jumps over his shoulder and looks down at the beach, I don't feel like we saw any footprints. It's not like there's no indication that there was somebody just standing there a second ago. I'm going to back it up actually and just like double check that. Well, actually there are some footprints, but there's like enough footprints that it's really kind of hard to know whether they're new, fresh footprints or not. But yeah, there's just something that feels sort of like he might have just been at the wrong place at the wrong time. But also, what is he fucking doing outside at 3:00 in the morning? Because that seems to be when we see the time. The camera is very like particular about swooping through the house and showing us the time, and showing us his parents in bed facing away from each other as well. Like there is a pretty good indicator throughout. Okay, it's 3:20. It looks like in the morning. That they don't have a great relationship anymore from the start, which I really picked up on immediately because of the way. And guys, again, if you want to help me, dad's name, mom's name, daughter's name, feed me, please feed me, Seymour. The mother is talking to the daughter about how she has to go to something, and the daughter's arguing with her, and the mother sort of tries to hook her husband in on the argument and be like, doesn't she have to? And he says something like, I don't want to get involved. And in my opinion, if you are, as a parent, are refusing to throw in on an argument that your spouse is having with their child, unless it's something that's truly like you have a like moral stance against, that to me feels like you are failing the solidarity test, and that looks like a weakness in your relationship. And so when he says, I don't want to get involved, my dander was immediately raised, because I just didn't like the fact that he was trying to like excuse himself from the conversation. It felt like that he was trying to keep himself from getting involved in the way a parent should absolutely want to be involved, shirking responsibility, basically. And when we find out later, she asks him, where were you? He says, I was on a job. And there's a sound to that. I was on a job is a thing that criminals can also say. I don't feel like we know exactly what his line of work is. We see him heading into town. I don't have a like good idea of what job he was heading for. Is he the one that's supposed to be doing the photographs that Ellie's cousin is saying so-and-so always lets you down? But regardless, it's pretty clear that either he's lying and he wasn't on a job, or he isn't telling her the whole story as to what that even means. And the tone that she takes when she asks, where were you, is the tone of a woman who believes him to have been cheating. And based on the distance they seem to have from one another, that would make sense. Because, like, eventually, when they are given the news that it is indeed their son that's found on the beach, there isn't the kind of support, but like back and forth between the two of them that you would expect to see from two parents who had just gotten this news. They each are very separate in their grief in the moment, and he's in denial as she sort of collapses. And later on, when he talks to his son's corpse, when he goes and like, because he says, I want to see him. It might not be him. And tells him, I let you down. It feels like there's more to that than just like, I should have kept you safe. And that's what I think is going, like, there was something else, and that is part of his feeling guilt here. And I think that might be why he was in denial as well initially, was because he doesn't want to believe that something could have happened, because if it did, he knows he's partially at fault, and he doesn't want that to be the case. So he's just trying to pretend this didn't happen, that this isn't real. So God, I'm jumping all over the place, but I feel like, you guys are probably able to follow this. Like, this is the episode, as much as there is a lot of dialogue and conversation that I think is crucial to, like, knowing who the characters are, recapping a lot of it is actually pretty simple. Oh, okay, thank you. Jesse in the chat says, Beth and Mark are the parents, daughter is Chloe. So Beth, like, this is what I mean about the dread, is the whole first, like, 10 minutes of the episode, nobody is aware that Danny is dead. And Beth is looking for him. Apparently this kid has, like, a paper route. So he's often gone before the family even gets up. And his lunch is still here. Like, he forgot his lunch. But she's apparently going to go there having, like, a field day at school or something. And so she grabs his lunch and she heads down there and she is just planning to give it to him. And it's, like, sort of unusual that he forgot it, but it's not really out of character. And so there's a long period where it just seems like everything is fine. He just, and then she gets there and finds out that he didn't arrive. She thought he was going to be here already. And they tell Beth that they haven't seen Danny since yesterday. And this is when she really starts to get that feeling. This is something, actually, I specifically remember my mother mentioning this to me when I said at the beginning that I've heard that the show is a little devastating. My mother watched this a while back, and I had to really be like, please don't tell me a fucking thing, because she loves to act like something isn't a spoiler and then tell me a spoiler, and I just get so angry. So now I have this firm, like, no policy. But the one thing she did say was that the acting of the mother who, like, finds out her child is dead was so upsetting to her and so accurate to the feeling of thinking something has happened to your child. And I am sure most of us have had the experience of, like, getting lost and being reunited with a parent who is as frantic as we were, and them being, like, combination angry and also so relieved that their anger just sort of evaporates in the face of that. But that slow build of dread for Beth is really just so hard to watch, because the moment that she leaves here, she tries to call her husband to find out, if he has heard anything else. She calls Jack, who it turns out is the man in charge of, like, his paper route. And like she says, he did come do his paper route this morning, didn't he? And then he has to tell her no. And that's the moment where she's like, oh no, like, they haven't seen him since last night then. This is changing the timeline completely. So she begins to just sort of look around for him. And she finally, like, gets in her car. And I'm not actually sure where she is heading when she, like, gets in her car, if she's going to try and find her husband or what the actual plan was here. But she gets stuck in a traffic jam. And she gets out of the car, and there's, like, it's really interesting. She's the only one who gets out of the car asking, what do you think is going on? Or no, I'm lying. I'm seeing right now that there's a couple people who have gotten out and they're walking around, because it's, like, such a complete dead stop. I've been in traffic jams like this, and I was headed to the beach, and I just had some lawn chairs and literally, like, got out of my car and put the lawn chairs out and just sat next to my car for, like, half an hour. So this girl that she asks says, someone said the police are at the beach. They might have found a body. And that is the moment where she really knows. She knows. Finding out he didn't do his paper route is the dread really, like, coming to a focus. And hearing that they found a body, she fucking knows. And we see her just sprinting to the beach and eventually getting there and losing it, because she sees his shoes and she knows it's him. Meanwhile, they've had to cordon off this significant portion of the beach. And this is when we see the inspector say, God, don't do this to me. And these cliffs are really something here. I wonder where this was filmed because it's striking, you know? The beach is huge. It goes back, like, it's ages back. And when he stops and after he says, "Don't do this to me," he low-key looks like he's about to have a panic attack. Like, he does this thing where he looks a little shaky and has to take a deep breath and stops and sort of centers himself in the way that you do when you have learned to cope with trauma, when you have gone through something really awful and you have started to learn that you're just going to have to live with this and learn how to live with it. The feel of him in that moment is just barely controlled panic. And it's really, that is some acting, man. That is some acting right there. And the camera sort of goes out of focus as if to suggest that he's going out of focus, as if his vision is what's doing that. And it cuts from the kid, a picture of the kid's body, to the waves rolling, back to his face, back to the kid, to the waves again. And there's a feel of familiarity. I don't know if it's just that he's sort of zeroing in on his senses in order to center himself, or if whatever happened to him before also involved ocean waves, and that is part of what's triggering him right now. But there's just, it feels so much like everything has sort of come together in this moment to trigger a very specific memory. And he finally has to tell himself, "Oh, come on," like, to get himself back together. So at this point, Ellie arrives, and she's predisposed to not like him because he got her job. But she's almost completely distracted from that by her recognizing Danny, because apparently Danny is her son's best friend. So she knows who he is right away. And what is David Tennant's character? You know what? He's about to introduce himself in the script, so I don't even think you need to bother. But yeah, she... Alec Hardy. Okay, Alec. And he tells her, because she's really flipping out, he tells her to shut it off. You're working a case. And she gets offended for an instant and then seems to realize pretty quickly he's probably right. He holds his hand out to shake her hand and she won't shake his hand, which is like a combo. You took my job and also you kind of yelled at me just now, so kind of fuck you a little bit. And this turns out like the body is far enough away from everybody who saw it, and the town seems to be just big enough that this kid isn't instantly recognized by whomever found him. So the remainder of most of this episode is surrounding trying to keep it under wraps, his identity, because they're still trying to like ask questions and they don't want people prepping their stories, or, you know, there's just all kinds of reasons to not want to release this sort of information. Never mind the simple like media circus that will inevitably descend on the family once it's discovered. And because nobody has seen the body close up who knew him, they're able to keep that up for a fair amount of time. But there is this kid that we meet who is a journalist. And we find out that he's pretty ambitious. He's over here trying to apply to various newspapers. And Ollie, that's his name. And he is sent down there after he gets his rejection notice from, I think, the Daily Mail. And he is just sort of hanging around waiting for any information to surface, pretty much. And eventually, Chloe, the older sister, comes over there with her boyfriend, who is Grey Worm, which is hilarious. Evidently, she is underage for him to be dating her. And so their relationship is not like well known. And by not well known, I mean apparently completely secret. She comes there with a stuffed animal to place at the grave site, but not exactly, because that's still cordoned off. To place at the sign for the beach, I guess. And Ollie spots her doing that, puts two and two together. He calls up Ellie and tries to press her to confirm the identity of the body. She refuses and is very pissed at him for even putting her in this position at all. And he hangs up on her and tweets it. And it's really obvious when he tweets it. He knows this is a shit move. He really knows better. But he is so frustrated at the fact that he hasn't gotten recognition, despite the fact that he has applied everywhere and works really hard. And it's clear he really does work hard. You know, he comes in with photos for this article that his boss had kind of decided they probably weren't going to be able to run, or at least not run like in the spot on the front page that she had intended, because there weren't any good photos, and he got them for her because the guy who was supposed to come through let them down. He is, based on his relationship with her and the way that they talk, a bit of a darling to her. Somebody that is pretty good, and she seems very confident that he'll be able to get out of there eventually, even if nothing's coming together for him yet. So he tweets this because in some ways, this is all about him. This is just, he wants to get ahead of this and make a splash. He doesn't ask her either, his boss, whether it's okay. Like, just doesn't actually bring anybody else into this decision. And when that tweet is discovered by a larger newspaper, it begins to look like maybe this actually has paid off for him. He's all regrets and apologies and everything by the end of the episode. But it's not, to me, it doesn't seem like this is going to actually be a source of regret for him in terms of his career anyway. This seems like the beginnings of somebody who is going to start doing this sort of thing because it has paid off before. So why not, you know? And yeah, eventually this other reporter, she convinces her boss to allow her to come up there to investigate it. And she is put up in the same hotel that Alec is apparently staying in. So we shall see how that goes. But I felt so bad for Ellie because she sort of gets the end, she gets blamed for Ollie posting this tweet as if she confirmed it, but she didn't. He just happened to call her and she wouldn't confirm or deny. And he took that and said in his tweet, sources suggest that the victim is 11-year-old Daniel. And it's just enough for him to be able to say that and like get this out there without actually putting her name on it. And I sort of appreciated that she came forward and told the truth about what happened, even though it really wasn't her fault. Because I feel like it's the sort of thing that, as much as she's in disgrace for the moment that she confesses this, it will blow over a lot faster than if he were to find out, him being Alec, to find out later that she was the contact and didn't say anything. That said, he would have fucking posted this anyway, I feel like, even if she hadn't even answered her phone. I really feel like this is the dude who is just going to do what he's going to do. However, I deeply understand Alec's frustration. And he comes back into the office and just goes off and he says something about how the family trusted them. And does anybody in this room have any understanding of what it's going to be like to have to rebuild that after doing something like this? They were supposed to keep this confidential, you know? So yeah, I feel for Ellie here being sort of at the whim of this cousin who is making her look bad through no fault of her own. She is really being as professional as she can, and it doesn't really matter because he's just doing whatever the fuck. And I don't know if he learned his lesson or not. Like I said, it just seems like as much as he's playing the penitent boy, he really is getting what he wanted by the end of this episode. So I guess we'll see. Let's see. I'm trying to jump forward to the scene where they have to go inside and tell the family that it is their son is really rough. I appreciated how much the camera lingers on everyone. And they give this all a lot of time to sort of play out naturally, because this has always been something for me, and it's understandable. Of course I get it, but in like procedurals, when you have, it's just like a case of the week thing. Every time that the police come and tell somebody that so-and-so was found dead, the person is remarkably composed. Occasionally you'll see somebody crying, but a lot of the time it's just like this sort of shock or whatever. Not the kind of actual falling to pieces that I would expect to happen and that I know for me would happen. I mean, if somebody came and told me something had happened to Owen, I would just absolutely be, no conversation would happen. There would be no talking to me. And it always would feel so false to me when I watch shows like that and people were just able to keep it together for an interview. And I loved that they let this breathe in the way that they do. And everybody just sort of is allowed to just cry. Even Ellie is sitting there with her eyes full of tears, and Beth is just falling apart. Mark is looking like he is trying not to cry, and Ellie is pulling away from him. Not Ellie, Beth. Like, he keeps trying to put his arm around her and draw her in, and she's sort of shoving against him and feels really stiff. And I think that's our indicator that maybe she blames him. I don't know. But when the way that she talks to him later, that felt like it followed through with this. Now, it could also just be that she's the kind of person that when she's in this sort of state, she doesn't want comfort, which I am like that personally. I want comfort if I am like depressed and that's why I'm crying, something like that. But if something has happened that's traumatic, I usually want to be given space and left to my own self so that I can just melt down on my own. And that might be it. But it really, to me, it seemed like her distancing herself very purposely from him. And she is like shaking in this way that felt so real to me. And the camera cuts from her to Alec, and he has a very like grave expression on his face. And I appreciated that a lot. He's not crying, but he looks like he's not crying because he's cried already too much. Like, he looks like the kind of person who has just sort of cried out and doesn't really have it left in them. Not that he's not affected by this, not that it's not sad, but he doesn't have that kind of emotional reaction anymore because he just seems so tired, you know? So yeah, then we kind of jump ahead in time a little bit to them like talking about what could have happened. And when they found the body, there was a bit of discussion between Ellie and Alec about whether or not he jumped off the cliff, whether or not he killed himself, basically. Ellie is certain that he didn't, and we find out from, the people who have examined the scene that that is not what happened. But he has to look at that, and he asks also if this is like a spot for that, and she says no, but there are some other places, and mentions them specifically, spots that people do go to kill themselves that are sort of popular for that sort of thing. And that is what they ask, whether or not he seemed like he was depressed, whether or not he seemed like anything was wrong or was acting different or anything was going on. They ask when they all last saw him, and Beth says, I looked in on him about 9 last night. He was lying in bed, reading. And she says this, and like, as I'm rewatching this, she is pulled away from her husband, sort of huddled to one side of the sofa away from him. He has his arm around his daughter, but she isn't interacting with him like that. And I can't help but wonder if her saying, like, I looked in on him at 9:00, is her hoping that her husband will like chime in and be like, oh yeah, I checked on him at like 1 a.m. That's when I got in from work, but he doesn't offer that. So she knows for sure that he didn't get home by that hour. And this is when he says that he wants to come down and see. And it's pretty great acting, honestly. Him showing up at the spot where he is meant to view the body. On the way in, he gets sort of stopped by this guy who wants him to sign a petition. And it's such a good moment of like this inevitable thing that happens in life where you have just gone through something really awful and there is a person who means well, but doesn't know that this just happened to you, and they're acting like everything is fine and normal. And you are not in a space where you can tell them right now what happened, because maybe you don't have time. Maybe you're surrounded by people and you don't want to do this right now. Maybe you're afraid if you begin talking, you're just going to lose it and begin crying. So you have to act like you're cool, even though inside your head you are screaming and like angry. Let's be honest. You're angry, even though you're not angry at them. It's not their fault. They are the one putting you in the position where you have to pretend right now. And it's the worst. It's really so well done the whole way that he behaves here and tries to like be as generous with this guy as he can and be as kind as he can, keeping in mind that the dude doesn't know, while also going through one of the worst things you could go through in your life. And I pretty much talked about like the way he talks to his son. And that happens later anyway, because we cut from him like going inside the building to the examination by Alec of Danny's room. He's got his gloves on and he's looking at all of the marks on the wall of his height. And there is just such pain on his face as he looks around. There doesn't seem to be any signs of forced entry. There doesn't seem to be any indicator that there was a struggle in the room. Nothing seems out of place. It's bizarre, honestly. Like, there's just no real explanation for what the hell he was doing out of the room at that hour of the night. And again, there is a sense, and this is a 100% guess, as he's looking around, there is a sense to me of really deep sadness. And I wonder if like he lost a child, if he lost a son, or if the original victim that I'm like saying maybe was he like suspected of something, if that was a young boy. There's just a way that he interacts with the room that has this like he has a look to his eyes that's far away. Like he's seeing stuff, but it's reminding him of something else. And that's really what he's thinking about, not what's in front of him right now. And okay, so yeah, then we go to Mark looking at the body and finally realizing that this is actually his son, and nodding and like slowly the tears showing up. And he asks if he can touch his son, and she has to tell him no. And he says, why him? He was just a little boy. He was just, he's only little, isn't he? And yeah, this is a tough scene. He tries to apologize basically to his dead kid. I'm sorry that I wasn't there for you. I let you down. And it's awful because as of right now, as viewers, we have no idea if he's telling the truth. Like, and I don't mean telling the truth like I believe he is telling his truth. But I mean, we don't know what happened, so we don't know if anything he could have done could have affected what actually happened to him. There's just, when he says, I am so, so sorry, there is a feel like he really seems to take it on himself that this happened. And I'm super curious what the hell was going on, you know, like, what was he out there doing? Is he doing something that's like criminal? Is he cheating? Was he supposed to be home? What's going on? So then we cut to Alec, and he's having his like meeting with all of his staff basically. And is like, we need to find out whether he was taken, whether he snuck out. We need to collect CCTV. And he asks Ellie about the family. And is like, tell us what you can about them, since, you know, he doesn't know anybody around here. And she says Beth had Chloe, their eldest daughter, when she was 15 and Mark was 17. Mom and daughter were at home watching telly. They say they didn't leave the house until school the next morning. Dad was out on an emergency call out. He's a plumber. He didn't get home until around 3. Neither parent thought to check on Danny. Gran lives nearby. She was in all evening. Other Gran lives in Wales. And, okay, so he was at a job. Yeah, he's full of shit. She had her daughter when she was 15 and he was 17. That sucks. That sucks. Can I just say, like, that I just can't imagine shouldering that at that age. I can't imagine. I was thinking about it the other day that at my age, I am 36 years old. My mother had a 17-year-old daughter. And my brain broke a little thinking about that. Like, the extent to which I am not ready to do something like that is so, that cannot be overstated. And oh my God, you know, it also goes a ways to perhaps explaining Beth and Mark's relationship. They were so young and they got married likely due to the pregnancy. So do they even really care about each other at this point in their lives? Who knows? They're completely different people. They have another child after. So that could be an accident. That could be planned. But it does make you feel like, wow, that's probably a relationship that neither of them particularly wanted the way that it worked out, you know? But yeah, that was a bit of a shocker, to be honest. When she said that, I was like, fuck, that is, because I did have a moment of like, is that her daughter? She doesn't look old enough. And then when they said that, I was like, oh, okay. Because sometimes in Hollywood, and this isn't Hollywood because it's the BBC, but nevertheless, in media, you are meant to believe that somebody is older than they are. Y'all have seen movies and TV shows like that, where the person who's meant to be the parent barely looks 10 years older than the person that's supposed to be the kid. And you're just like, yeah, I don't think so. But you have to go with it because that's what they've decided. So I kind of just thought that's what it was, that I was just going to have to go with it. But no, within the text of the script, it's explained that they are incredibly close in age, actually. So they go and talk to Filch, who runs the basically like convenience store that has the paper route and everything. And they asked him whether or not the kid was acting weird or anything. And he basically says, I only saw him for like 10 minutes first thing in the morning. I don't know anything about him. I can't say whether he was acting weird. I'm not a psychiatrist. At this point, Alex says, are you married? He says, no. Are you? In this very like, well, that was a little bit cheeky asking me that question sort of tone of voice. And I gotta say, for me, this guy is prime suspect. Just because Filch never plays a good guy, like, ever. It just so rarely happens that he's, like, a good guy, and so I have to put him on the watch list because typecasting, you know? And also, anytime that you've got an old man who interacts with children without supervision from parents necessarily, in stories like this, it's rarely innocent, unfortunately. That said, Danny wasn't assaulted in any sexual way, apparently anyway, from what they were able to tell from their examination. So it does seem to rule out, and that's part of why I think maybe Danny just saw something that he wasn't supposed to see, because normally when it would be something like this, it would be the molestation and then murder of a child, and that doesn't seem to have been a factor. So I don't know, you know? But yeah, he says something about how it's not right. And that is just like the cue. And then we cut to the explanation of how he was killed, strangulation, facing the person who did it. So he knew what was happening to him and was probably really brutal. And they go back to the family and have to tell them that his death was not an accident. And, you know, the family seemed to, I think, be sort of holding on to hope that he had just had a terrible, like, maybe he drowned even. I think they were sort of probably wondering. But now they have to face that there is somebody out there who did this. And who knows what other children are at risk at this point. Ellie's husband asks her about that. And it's just like, do you think that we need to worry for the other kids in town? And when she asks Alec about that and is like, do you think that's something that we need to be concerned about? Alec just says, maybe. You know, he doesn't really, what has he got to go on that she doesn't also have? Like, probably that's something we should keep an eye on at the very least. So after that conversation is when Ollie goes and tweets the thing. All of that, like, sort of spirals out of control. Poor Ellie is, like, humiliated because it was her cousin that did this whole thing. And then they are forced to basically do a sort of impromptu press conference where he gives everybody Danny's identification because now they're sort of in a corner and they have to. And that's when the, and I forgot to mention that, what's his face from How to Get Away with Murder and Harry Potter is like this journalist's friend who tips her off about the tweet. And I just can't, that kid is so strange looking to me. And as a grown up, he looks almost exactly the same as he did as a child. Normally, like, especially dudes, from children, when they grow, their whole face changes. And his hasn't, and it's very strange and off-putting to me. But we get this, like, there's two scenes that I want to just mention really quick before I wrap, because I'm almost out of time. There's the scene between Beth and Ellie where Beth just says, promise me, Ellie, because I don't know the fucking guy you're working with. He means nothing to me. But you and me and our kids meant something to each other, and I am counting on you. And Ellie says that she swears. For what it's worth, Alec also swears earlier. He says, I swear to you that we will find who did this. I promise you. Which is not something that cops often do, make promises. That's supposed to be like, you know, just not done. And then we have the scene with Ellie where she tells her son what happened. And the kid is extremely subdued, doesn't seem hugely surprised. And it's like hard to know because we aren't there to see what he has already heard. Like her husband tells her, I've kept him away from everything all day. He doesn't know. But there's a feel to this that he is not surprised by it. And he asks her very specifically if the police are going to come and ask him any questions. And then when she leaves, he gets on his phone and highlights all of the texts that he was getting from Danny and deletes all of them, then gets on the computer and deletes a bunch of files and is like kind of sobbing as he's doing this, like really barely keeping it together. He like kind of puts a hand over his mouth like he's going to sob out loud. And it's awful to watch. So then at the very end, we see Ellie and Alec watching the CCTV, and they see Danny going down the middle of the main street of town on his skateboard. And apparently he wasn't taken. He left of his own accord. But they don't know where his skateboard wound up. Where is that? And also, she says, him and my son had the same model telephone. They had the same cell phone. And his phone is also nowhere to be found. So that's also something that's missing. So yeah, a really like something really strange is going on here. I don't know what an 11-year-old is sneaking out of the house to do in the middle of the night. If he were older, I would just figure it was him acting out, or perhaps being like interested in a girl and going to see her, you know, like he's 11 though. What could it be? So then we have like the final moment that Alec is speaking to the cameras, and Alec looks just exhausted when it zeroes in on him at one point. There's just no life in his eyes until he begins to talk about what's going on. And when the Daily Mail reporter comes in, I can't tell if he recognizes her or not. It feels like he doesn't, but I can't tell. And he says, if you or someone you know has any information, has noticed anything unusual, please come forward now. I'd urge everyone, don't hide anything, because we will find out. If a member of your family or a friend or a neighbor has been behaving differently in the past days or weeks, please tell the police immediately. There will be no hiding place for Danny's killer. We will catch whoever did this. And then we go back to the beach and we see this like this track that's sort of in the sand. And it's unclear to me whether that was supposed to have happened that night, whether we're seeing this that afternoon or what that was. But as he's saying all of this, we cycle through the characters that we met, most of them that Mark met when he was like walking through the town downtown, and each of them reacting to this news bulletin. And what's his face is the priest, apparently, or the vicar, or whatever you call it, that plays Rory on Doctor Who, and that was a weird moment. But I don't like it. I don't like him showing up here. I am just highly suspicious of old men and young boys is really what it comes down to. And it's an unfortunate thing, but that's just like my immediate reaction to shit like this. And I hate that I have it, but it's ingrained. And so when it's an old man like Filch, I'm on my guard. When it's a priest, all the more so. The fact that there doesn't seem to have been any sexual violence notwithstanding, there's molestations that can happen without that ever having been apparent to an examination. So, you know, I don't know. Yeah, but I'm over time, so I got to wrap. But I am super excited about keeping on with this series. It looks like so far I'm booked up to episode 5 of this first season. So, and that's happening February 2nd. The next episode of this one is coming up on the 20th, so it's just going to be next week. And then the next one after that won't be until January. So it'll be a bit of a break. So just FYI, you guys, if you're interested in contributing to that, Patreon, or not Patreon, unspoiledpodcast.com/shop. All right. I have to go. I'm over time. Thank you again, Paul, and Jamie also for putting this title out there for people. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
Unspoiled Network podcast.